The first motion I need is a motion to approve the minutes of April 25th, 2023. Dr. Blair and Mr. Phelan is the second. I think Mr. Elsasser said he would try to call in, so if we have him call in, we will approve him to join, but we'll wait till we hear from him. Brian, are you on? Yeah. Oh, okay. So I'll back up if I can and make a motion to include Mr. Elsasser as a phone-in, Mr. Renault, and Dr. Blair. All in favor of including Brian as a call-in with the sign of aye? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Brian, welcome. Thanks for joining.
I'll be right up in a little bit.
Okay. We might be done by then, but go ahead. So the approval of minutes, we have them first and a second. Any comments, changes, corrections for the approval of the minutes? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the minutes with the sign of aye? Aye. 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 Those opposed with a nay? All right, that passes. We have informational items, the workforce report, and we've added a new vacancy report, so I'm going to ask Administrator Sorrell to present those to us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll find the workforce report on page 4 of your packet, I believe. So this is information through the end of April of this year. As we share every month, the top third of the page of the report shows applications and new hires. It compares last year to this year. This year, during the month of April, we had 27 positions posted, and we had a total of 6 positions filled. Just as a reminder, as you know, it sometimes takes longer than a month to fill a vacant position. So just because any one of those 6 new hires we had in April, that doesn't automatically mean it was for one of the positions that was opened in April. Middle third is demographics of the workforce as of the end of April, and the bottom third looks at separations, showing how they are, the types of separations that we have, so resignations, retirements, or other, and then which department had the most separations during the month, and then comparing the same month year over year. Happy to answer any questions before we move on to the vacancy report.
Sorry, Mr. Phelan?
Could you remind me, do all departments in the county complete exit interviews?
No. Exit interviews are, I would say, hit and miss.
Any other questions? Ms. Williams?
Going off that JDC, we had quite a few there. Is there a reason?
I'm going to look to our HR team to see if they have any insight on that.
Are you saying like a lot of openings or terms?
Separations?
Separations. A lot of it's just the nature of the job, just a higher turnover type of position. And they do exit interviews at JDC pretty regularly, so. Mm-hmm.
So that would be a department that's a hit versus a miss.
Okay. Any other questions? Dr. Blair?
I'm not sure if this goes here or in the vacancy report. It might be also handy to see which jobs we are having great difficulty filling. So jobs that have been open for, 30 to 60 days. I don't know what's the right number there. But I noticed that some seem to, we always seem to be hiring for, and it might be interesting to see that information too.
So we can certainly provide that. There's going to be a handful of positions that there will always be a posting for.
Yeah, I could see like corrections officers
right.
and stuff, but perhaps, I could see why that would always be on there, but perhaps others that we just, for some
right.
reason,
yeah,
aren't
so
able to fill.
that next tier below that, we can certainly look at that.
Any other questions on the workforce dashboard? Okay, we'll move to vacancy, please.
Vacancy report. Angela put this together, so I'm actually going to have her walk through it for you, and we'll both try and answer any questions you might have.
Sure. So the initial vacancy report kind of started with from the budget book. That budget column is taken out of the budget book, so the number of vacancies that were budgeted for 2023 by department. Then within our new Munis system and our position control went through and looked at how many of those positions are actually filled with employees. And again, this is looking at the FTE. So you'll see that in the filled column. Those are actual number of employees. And then the vacant or overfilled, those are the number of budgeted positions that are vacant or overfilled that do not have employees currently in them. So again, then just totals, looking at it again by department. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
First off, thank you, Angela, for putting this together, because it was an ask that we had to try to understand kind of the vacancy and the staffing. So I think it does a good job, but I'd like to get some feedback from the rest of the committee on helping understand those topics of vacancies and our staffing numbers by department throughout the county. Is there some discussion or questions that can go to Angela or myself? Mr. Renault.
Thank you. I just had a question on the one overage that we do have at the coroner's office. How is that going to affect his budget? Will he have to come back again for another amendment to his budget?
That's a good question. I don't know. I see Shauna may want to make some comment, but we expect, I guess ultimately we expect all departments to manage to their budget regardless. So if this creates a concern or an issue that the coroner may have, we need to have that discussion sooner than later with the coroner to assure that that office stays within the budget that we were given and he had accepted. With that, Shauna, any additional comments?
That's correct. And so one of the things that I want to point out with regards to the FTE count and the budget column for the elected officials, so all of the departments that report up through Scott as county administrator, for example, in HR, we are tied to that number. So our number of FTEs cannot exceed, like in county administration, we have 8.9. Our number of FTEs, whether we have the budget or not, cannot exceed 8.9. We are tied to that number. Elected official offices, though, are not tied to that number. So that number that's in the budgeted column, for example, for the coroner is 8. He could fill that with 12 people as long as he didn't exceed his appropriation, right? So that, I just wanted to point out that difference to Steve's point, but that's not a hard and fast number. So that overage number for the countywide electeds is a little bit different than it is for those that report up through Scott. In addition, I know that Jamie's team had been training a new employee along with the separation, so there may have been a little bit of overlap for training purposes just for a few weeks as well. So.
Okay, Dr. I'll let Mr. Renault finish if I can.
Just to follow up real quick, if I could. Am I correct that the coroner did come for a budget amendment due to salary earlier this year? Is that correct? And one of the reasons for us given was because of somebody had retired and they were using more overtime?
I don't remember a budget
It
amendment.
was I think it may have been late last year because he was getting into the end of the year. He was going to be looking at possibly exceeding or likely exceeding his appropriation.
I don't remember the cycle, but it happened. I think it impacted last year's timing, but don't remember the details. But I guess I'm kind of a budget hawk, so I'm going to be one that, as one board member, that tries to make sure people understand that there is a budget for a reason, and we expect you to stay within it. And if there is a reason you're out of your budget, the sooner the better to come and discuss. We'll help you try to get back into your budget. We have resources. We have a CFO can provide support and others that are very talented in that space. Dr. Blair?
Remind me, we talked about this earlier this week, that overage in the coroner's office included that line that came from the auditor's office. Is that correct?
Yes, as that was one of those positions that was reallocated to that line item, yes.
Good question. Mr. Elsasser, you had a question?
I believe it was about 3.5 years ago, and then once again, about 1.5 years ago that we approved. I didn't approve it. I voted against it. More money for the coroner. And so the protocol in the past, like you had mentioned just about 5 minutes ago, has been that people stick to their budget, and that's just kind of the way it is. But twice that's happened, and so that was unacceptable for me.
Okay. No, appreciate the comments. Any other comments regarding the vacancy reports? Mr. Hare?
I missed the report previous to that, but I see the 14 people at the juvenile detention center, and we lost 6 the day last month. What type of positions are we losing the most at the detention center?
So it's going to be the youth development specialist. So they're the ones that are working directly with the kids.
Okay. And I did have a question on that previous report. I apologize for
go ahead.
being late. I do like the graphs with the different ethnicities. And I think we said we were going to invite the diversity officer to come in and tell us what we're shooting for. Or has that happened? Or do we know what we're shooting for in terms of these numbers?
Not to my awareness. I know the executive committee last month, diversity officer and his staff came in and presented a work plan, initial plan. In that, there were not metrics and definitions in it, and I think the diversity officer is working on those.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, Mr. Sorrell, if they're still in development, maybe is a fair way to say.
I would say that's an accurate summation, Mr. Chairman.
So
Okay.
Ideally, when, I don't know what the timing, we can ask the timing when the diversity officer will have those metrics where then they could come and present to this committee, and we can also maybe look at fitting that into the report as far as those metrics of, because I like your comments, the bar charts give you the
Pretty.
as is, but we don't have a plan. And again, as a budget guy, he's always like to know how are we doing against the plan, right? The
Yeah.
actual versus plan. So if we can get a plan view of diversity, ethnicity, whatever the diversity officer wants to categorize it as, I think that would be a good addition. So we'll make a note. Mr. Sorrell, any other comments?
None at this time.
No, good.
My final comment, this is the first time I've seen this chart, so whoever included it, good job, because it's
Yeah.
very informative.
I think Ms. Rachel Parker was the original, back when she was on the board, to ask for this to put in, so we have to acknowledge her putting this together a few years ago, correct, Rachel? Yep.
Thank you.
But no, it's good. I appreciate the comments. Cadence, I think I want to ask a question here. So the workforce dashboard we've been doing monthly. We have a risk analysis dashboard we do quarterly, and then we have this new vacancy snapshot. My initial reaction was quarterly is probably sufficient, but I'd like to get some input from the committee as to how often you want to see this vacancy of monthly, quarterly, semi-annually. What's a good cadence for it? Dr. Blair?
I think quarterly makes sense for it.
We got a quarterly. Anyone have a difference? Monthly? We got a monthly comment. I'll just kind of go around the room. Monthly, quarterly, semi-annual. What would be Mr. Elsasser? Quarterly, Mr. Renault? Okay, and, all right. You said quarterly, Camille? Monthly. Monthly? Mr. Hare? Okay.
I like monthly. If it's rosy, quarterly. If it's bad, monthly.
Okay. Mr. Phelan?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
I would say I'm fine with whatever direction the majority wants to go. The only thing I would appreciate if we could have historical data maybe added to that as well, if it was an easy thing to put to compare.
Kind of trending how the vacancies are going versus just the current snapshot.
Exactly.
I think that's always good to have a trend, so we don't just have a snapshot and like, well, last month, where were we? The previous month, or 6 months, or a year ago. Angela, I guess you put this together. I'm sure the first time through was a fair amount of work. What's your comment on
It was,
this?
yeah. It was a little bit more work than I had anticipated, but I'm hoping now that we kind of have it cleaned up, and as we continue, in with the new system, we're still learning about all of the reporting capabilities. So yeah, I will. I'll put this together monthly, and then, if it's taking more time or things like that, I'll definitely let you know. The trending aspect, this is just a snapshot. So, as far as keeping, maybe from the previous quarters, we could show that, but it is just a snapshot as to when I pull the data, so I don't have it from a certain point in time.
Why don't we do the monthly initially, and with the current layout you have, and then we can look at historical trending as a follow-up,
Okay.
not immediately.
Sure.
Any other comments on this one? I thank you, everyone, and thank you, Angela, for putting it together, and Scott. One more item, the item on our packet for a resolution, making a chairman's amendment or movement here. We're moving this to an informational item this month. And kind of the reason is it's a fairly substantial topic, talking about the comprehensive human capital management study, the RFP. And I think as a committee, we need to make sure we have enough time to understand, digest what is the outcome of what's the desired outcome, the scope of it. And obviously we have a projected cost, which is, it's there, it's documented. So at this point, we will not vote on it today. What I'd like to do is get some feedback, and I informed Mr. Sorrell I'd like to have the committee maybe share some concerns or initial feedback. Again, most of you have only had a few days to even see this. I don't think anyone was aware of it probably until the board packet came out. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Sorrell if you want to make any additional comments before we open it up for the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you and the committee are desirous, we can at least walk through a summary of what the item is, the impetus behind it. Just as a reminder for the committee members, roughly a year ago, after the sale of Headington Oaks, this study was the second top priority in the outflow of the administrator's evaluation, my evaluation at the end of 21, but we didn't budget any money for it last year. We did put in the recommended budget, and you approved funds for this project in the 23 budget. As you can see, the number that we budgeted for was insufficient. As I shared with the chair and the vice chair last week when we were talking about the agenda item, that number that was originally in the budget, which is $300,000, was a best estimate. We don't have relationships with the providers in this space, and so we did not have the opportunity to send an email or make a phone call and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. This is what the scope of work would be. How much should we budget for it? We didn't have that opportunity or those connections to do that. So we knew it was going to, when we put the budget together last fall, we knew it was going to be a big number. Obviously, it came back bigger than what we anticipated. But this is likely what the resources that are needed financially to do a study of this size and scope. So those would be my only initial comments, and then, like I said, Mr. Chairman, if you want Shauna to walk through some of the key points in the agenda briefing, we're happy to do that. Otherwise, we're happy to take questions.
Shauna, would you give us just kind of a highlight of the key topics, just so we're all on the same knowledge level before we take questions?
Sure. So this is a RFP for what we're calling a human capital management strategy. So you may recall a number of years ago, there was a study conducted that looked at positions within our organization related to the size of our organization, right? Were positions spread throughout the county appropriately? This is somewhat the opposite of that, in that what this study is designed to do is to look at what is our compensation structure on basically 3 different levels. And so the first key component would be a salary market study. So this is going to go out and do benchmarking for our positions, looking at locally, looking at regionally, statewide, and across the Midwest market, and looking at our rates of pay and how does that line up with similar organizations throughout those regions. The second component of this is doing basically the same analysis, but for the county-wide elected positions. As you recall, you set that prior to the start of their term, and we go in and we do our own little study at that time. But we have struggled in the past to get some of that data from a regional perspective. So this would be to assist us with that. The third component of that is then looking at our benefit package, and what does our benefit package look like compared to other employers. And this is looking at non-health insurance related benefits, okay? And part of that is because, like everybody else, we're struggling to attract and retain talent, right? It's not just a Peoria County problem, that's a problem for all employers. So looking at, and in going through the board's strategic planning process, we heard a lot about being an employer of choice, and how do we attract and retain talent and be a competitive employer. So really this is looking at wages and benefits and how we stack up against that to give us that data. And then also the final component of that is the consultant would take all of that information and develop a strategy for us going forward, saying, okay, you're good in your retirement benefits, but you need to look at your non-retirement benefits to be more competitive. You're good in or look at wages and those types of things. So really just helping us to where are we compared to those other employers, and what would be a good strategy for us moving forward, whether that be in phases or all at once. And Scott, if I missed anything, let me know.
Okay. No, thank you for giving that kind of overview. And again, as you mentioned, we did a efficiency study 2015, I think, kind of a headcount efficiency. So this does not include that portion again. So we're not looking at how many headcount does it take to staff office A, B, or C. It's the compensation based on the job title, job description, the workload against other benchmark jobs of the same category, title, and such. Is that kind of a fair? It's a comparison of compensation in general for similar jobs.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, Mr. Elsasser had his hand up early here, so.
Yeah, I'm done. Go ahead.
Well, I'll try to keep an open mind, but I'll probably be voting against this because I think it's a waste of money. We have, like, for example, the sheriff. I think he has people coming and going all the time, and I bet you he can tell you almost exactly what the package is for the city, for Tazewell County, for Sangamon County, other similar sized counties that, like ours. And so why do we need some professional people to come in and tell us this? I mean, like if the circuit clerk is losing employees, they're going to say, well, I'm going over to this county and working for them because they're paying more the wages are higher, the health insurance is better. And so we have people within the courthouse, namely our elected officials and top management, that hear this all the time, not maybe every day, but every week from their employees, we're not getting paid enough, or we like it here. And so I think the temperature's already been taken.
Okay. Good input. Appreciate it. I would just go around the horn here. Sharon?
Okay, I have several questions. We'll start out with this company. Scott, do you have anybody you know, administrators in other counties used them? Do we have any references?
They did provide references in their response. Most of those references are either state governments or agencies of state governments, but they do have engagements for other scopes of work for several counties in Illinois, most of them in the Chicagoland area, and through some of my professional associations, we are not the specific folks that will be assigned to our project, but I am aware of this company, yes, and the work that they do.
Okay. Next, our strategic plan. Do we have any idea when we're going to be getting a final report or information that we can all kind of look at and digest? Because it talks about strategic plan in here, is get engaged in the planning process. So I'm just wondering when we can expect.
Go ahead, Shauna.
I believe that should be soon. I have an email into Jim and Greg. They had sent back and had finalized the polling of the board.
Great.
And had sent us kind of a final review, so I'm following up with them to get an ETA. But we should be really, really close.
Okay, appreciate that, thank you. Next, it says their bid was 490, but you've got 450. Can you talk a little bit about that, why those numbers are different?
So the RFP had multiple scope items, and in reading their response, the team, which was Shauna, Angela, and myself, determined that there were two scope items that were either not necessary for either cost reasons or for how we're going to ask them to approach scope item 4. So in some areas, what we did is we tried to combine some of those areas and then at the same time reduce cost.
Okay, and my final question, this includes equity impact. I sort of feel like that's redundant work since we have a DEI officer who's supposed to be doing that work.
So what Andre is working on is going to be integrated into the final product, and so there will be less work done by the consultant in that space. It'll be more of taking the work that Andre is doing and then including it in the final product.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Questions? Mr. Renault?
Thank you. I have a couple also. The first one is, hello?
Yeah.
There
You're
we
good.
go.
I'm on. Okay. The first one involves scope 5 and 6, and I think Shauna may have kind of touched on a little bit, but as far as redundancy in branding, I feel we have a very competent communications department here. What can they do differently than what our communications people can do for us?
So that's one of the scope items we eliminated. So we eliminated the branding and the compensation model. So it's if you look at page 13 of your packet, we eliminated scope item 4 and scope item 5, and then renumbered scope item 6 to number 4. So if there's any confusion about that, I apologize.
Is there a newer version than what I have?
So, Rob, if you look at the agenda briefing, that has the 4 scope items. What you're looking at is the original fee schedule
Gotcha.
that they submitted.
Understood. And is there any chance that this would go, since there was only one bid submitted, is there any chance for a rebid process to see if we can get a competitive bid?
We solicited, over 44 vendors downloaded the RFP document, and so that's a pretty broad cross section as to how and why. We only received a response from this vendor until the board makes a decision under our own purchasing rules. We can't go out and talk to any of those 43 others to see why they did not respond.
So is there a chance with removing some of the scope that we might have more bidders?
I don't know until we're able to, to talk to those folks. But based on who we asked Jim in purchasing to make sure that the RFP was distributed to, in addition to normal means, it would have been firms similar to Ernst & Young. So it would have been Deloitte, it would have been KPMG, it would have been Sikich, it would have been Baker Tilly, and other firms that have consulting type of functions in their business model.
And then finally, the salary market study, that includes management and those who are represented by organized labor?
Includes all positions, represented and unrepresented.
Including elected positions too, correct?
Right. So the scope item 2 deals with the 4 countywide elected officials that the board still sets salaries for. The others, as we all know, are now set by statute as a percentage of someone else's. An example there is the sheriff and the state's attorney and the public defender. Even though the public defender is appointed, they're all percentages of someone else's.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Renault? Apologize, I'm going to run over into your meeting time next meeting, but this is important. So, Ms. Allison?
I don't know what I may have missed before coming in, but I still go back to, I think if we're looking at an all-encompassing approach to this, that the health insurance needs to be a piece that's included. And I know that's being done separately in a different way, but I feel like it all belongs together.
Any comment on that, either Shauna or Scott?
It probably would have a significant impact on the price of the contract. Would be the only thing that we could add. And we obviously that wasn't in the scope of work item, so we don't have any proposals and we don't have any pricing for that. But I would suspect it certainly won't reduce the price of the contract.
But I do agree with Ms. Allison. That's a huge portion of compensation. We've all talked about it for many months and years, how that all ties in, and can we exclude it and not tie it together would probably be a concern. But Ms. Allison, any other comments before we move over? Okay, Dr. Blair?
I do remember at our strategic planning session that all the breakout groups talked about recruitment and retention. And as we just saw in the vacancy report, we have a lot of empty spots and a lot of separations. And so I do think it makes sense to put money towards really understanding where we sit in terms of wages, salaries, and benefits. So I am in support of that. I just want to make sure that if we're going to spend this money, that we're going to do something with the information we get. So if we find out that that our wages and benefits are at the industry standard or even above, that we're using that for recruiting and retention. And we know that if we can retain people, that's a lot cheaper than hiring new people. But if we find that we are lower in those things, then that it behooves us then to figure out how to spend more money to make those things happen, which is, of course, the biggest risk of this study is to find out that we just spent a lot of money to find out we're going to have to spend a lot more money.
Okay, good comments. Appreciate it. Ms. Coates? No additional. Mr. Hare?
I had a few questions. It seems like when we, under scope number 2, when we talk about the electeds, is the county board included in that, and are they purposely excluded from the study?
Based on prior discussions from board members and this committee in its previous iteration, we intentionally excluded the county board and just focused on the 4 countywide elected officials.
Okay. And my final comment would be that I have to side with Member Elsesser. I think the staff here does a great job, and that information's readily available. And to spend $500,000 to find out what perhaps we already know seems like the money might be able to be spent elsewhere.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Mr. Phelan?
Yeah, I'd just like to make clear that I am in support of Peoria County looking at several things included in the scope. However, I find it unusual this company has access to the information and the dollar amount would be almost $500,000. It was mentioned that they have worked with several counties across the state of Illinois, which would lead me to believe that they probably have access to a lot of the numbers that we would need. Going back to what Nate and Brian said, is we should have this information already accessible internally. However, the question I asked earlier about exit interviews being conducted, we're probably not collecting it in all departments, which is kind of disappointing to hear today. I think that is something that that's information that we're leaving on the table. I can't imagine we're putting an emphasis on retention and not understanding why employees are leaving.
Good comments. Appreciate that.
Just one follow-up I
Mr.
forgot
Hare?
to ask on the Ernst Young. Who is the county auditor? Not
Sikich?
Sikich is our external auditor.
Sikich.
Yeah.
And so they don't have this, they were in the pool and they just decided not to respond.
Correct.
Yeah, is it fair to say we don't have any feedback as to why, of 44 people who downloaded, which is common, right, to download a RFP request, how many of them took it serious? How many of them decided not to respond for reason X, Y, and Z?
And that's due to our rules that Scott just
Yeah.
can't call up his buddy at Sikich and say, hey, buddy, why didn't you bid on that?
Not until the board makes a decision to award a contract, we cannot do that.
Okay.
So we either make a decision to award the contract
it's kinda
or
after the
we
fact.
decline the contract, then we'd step back and review, do we change the bid, rescope the bid, and rebid with a different scope, and go back out and ask. That's an option, right?
It is an option to put it out again. You would, I would certainly recommend that we alter the scope of work because now that we do have a price scheme out there from a
Price.
respondent that doesn't have a level playing field if we're just going to do it the exact same thing all over again.
Yeah, and that's why I said, and I think Shauna mentioned that there's already a scope change been defined by the administration. So logically, you could take those two items out, go back to the scope, or maybe even spend a little time as a committee and administration on some of the questions asked here of, do we even further refine the scope, such as benefits? Try to make sure we're doing the right thing. So I don't want to lead the witness, so to speak. I'm just trying to get good input, and I appreciate all the input from the committee members. Mr. Renaud?
Just one last comment, and it's our challenge with recruitment and retention, I think, is huge because we are handcuffed to a benefit that we offer that a lot of new employees see no value in, and that's our pension benefit. So until we can get the newer workforce to see that benefit, I think we're going to be challenged because we can't offer maybe the same salary as other starting positions can in the private sector, but we offer a benefit to them that they don't. And I'm not sure how we're going to overcome that, and I'm not sure this company is going to be able to help us with that. But if they can, great. But I think that's going to be our hugest challenge with recruitment and retention.
Okay, good comments. Ms. Allison?
Following up Ben, on both this comment and Dr. Blair's comment, have we put any steps together as to what we're going to do hypothetically if A, B, C, or D, depending on what the results come back? Has there been any plan put into place, or are we just waiting to see what they say and then figure it out on the whim? I think if we don't have the ability to do anything with this, then this is quite a bit of money to, one, not have a full study because it doesn't include health insurance, and two, not have a plan to implement it.
Okay, good comments. Mr. Elsasser?
This is the first time I've served on this committee. Do we still have the Health Benefits Committee? This made up of some of the electeds and then some of the top management people, and
We do not.
you're not? Well, I would support, and I don't necessarily think it would cost us any money, some kind of a committee, perhaps made up of county board members and a few elected officials and some top management, and have them delve into what Miss Allison has been talking about with as far as the health plan. And, they can, do all the comparisons with the surrounding county, not surrounding, but the counties of comparable size. And so, because that keeps coming up. And I would support something like that, and I don't think that would even require a budget.
A budget amendment? Okay.
Well, it wouldn't require a budget amendment, but I don't think it would even require money out of the budget. I mean, if the committee would just meet, once a month for 4 or 5 months, and then come back and say, okay, this is how our health plan stacks up to someone else's, in Winnebago or Sangamon County or McLean, which are similar to us, or they can come back and maybe, like Mr. Renault said, maybe put some kind of a value, showing, a dollar value on what this is worth to an employee, if they come here and work.
Well, I'll maybe ask Mr. Renault, who chaired this before. We had a study and a presentation done probably in October timeframe of the benefits package. Apologies, I don't remember that. It's one of our contractors out of Pekin, right, that did that for us. And so we did have what I felt was a pretty solid presentation on our benefits plan and comparables. Rob, would you, off the top, be able to comment around that?
That was just based on healthcare, though, our healthcare benefits.
Yeah.
So that doesn't include pension benefit.
No.
Or, time off, vacation earned. I mean, to me, that all is included in the attractiveness of an employer is how much time do I get off? How quickly do I earn that time off? Again, the pension benefit is huge, but people just don't see the value in it anymore.
Correct. No, I was just referencing the healthcare portion and the premiums and the benefits they get. I thought it was a very good, and for those who haven't seen it, this is a new committee since then. Maybe Mr. Sorrell, we could push that report out to everyone so they're aware of what was presented.
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. We could even invite Unland to come back at a future meeting and give that presentation.
Okay. Is this?
I think that information is quickly becoming obsolete, though, once we get closer to going out to bid for new benefits.
Yeah, it could be potential now, especially with the changeover of Carl Health coming in and going out to bid for another healthcare provider. Ms. Williams?
I think at this time, I'm not in support of this. I think there's too many questions that we've asked, the scope of work and such. So, I'm at this time, maybe a different scope of work, possibly less money, and more refined on what we want exactly.
Okay.
I would not support this.
All right. I'm hearing maybe a few comments of the current proposal and bid scope. I think I've heard at least 3 currently would probably not support it as is. We pulled this out of the resolution. We're having discussion, so we're not taking an official vote. But I guess if I can get kind of just a general consensus across everyone here, we were taking a vote, and I don't know, am I out of line even to ask?
No, and it maybe cutting to the chase, Mr. Chairman. If there's that much discomfort from the committee, that's great. But aside from price and Member Allison wanting to add a scope of work item which would increase price, we will need policy direction from the committee on what you want to do differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Hare?
Well, just simply, it's very hard for me to read how how excited you are about it. And Shauna, how excited are you about this? On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you to do this thing?
Put her on the spot.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's a loaded question. I'm just.
Well, I mean,
I'm just kidding. Member
it's
Hare,
hard
I'm
to
just kidding, I
read.
jest.
No.
No, I understand. So,
Okay.
so, you know, I think a lot of the comment, if I can speak freely for a second, I think a lot of the comments that I've heard today around the horseshoe has been, you know, we have staff that can handle that. And to some extent, absolutely, right? We go in, we do benchmarking, we do these types of surveys internally. Where we struggle is we struggle sometimes to get the information back or to get the information back in a usable format. And so one of the benefits to, you know, me and Angela and our team with something like this, whether it's the scope or something different, is it's having someone with the actuarial background to go in and collect the data and analyze the data and give a recommendation. Because we maybe have some of those skill sets, but we don't have the bandwidth to do a study like this on that scale operationally at this point in time. So am I excited to do the study? I think, you know, obviously that was something that was in Scott's work plan from the board. So of course, and to get that data back, as long as we have an intention to do something with it versus just have it sit on a shelf.
You know, I would add to that a couple things. One, and again, Member Blair alluded to it, it is not without risk, because you might not like what the responses are. And I can assure you anecdotally that there are going to be positions in the organization that we are overpaying, those that we are underpaying, and those that we're paying just right. So Goldilocks is going to prevail. But we don't know which ones because of that bandwidth issue. You know, this is, for me, a critical piece of if the organization and the policymaking body, the board, wants to walk the walk of being an employer of choice and attracting and retaining talent, this is a critical step that we need to do. Is it a big ticket item? It absolutely is, but that's what these services cost in the industry. At least that's what we've been told because of the responses that we received. You know, I would say because of its critical nature, I am highly enthusiastic about this project and not just the need for it, but willing to take on the potential risk that comes with the results. And do we have to remember Allison's question, do we have a plan for, you know, what's going to happen afterwards? Part of the deliverables are going to be kind of an a la carte menu of implementation so that we can size the implementation based on the financial resources we have at that point in time. Is this going to be done for the FY24 budget cycle? No, it will not. But it'll allow you to make better informed decisions for collective bargaining. It'll allow you then to make better decisions about how we implement, if necessary, changes to the benefits that we do offer. You know, we offer multiple 457 deferred compensation plans. Most of our peers offer only one. How many of our team members are actually taking advantage of that? What are some things we should be doing to increase that, as an example? How do we stack up in terms of paid time off accruals, as Member Renaud alluded to? The number of holidays that we offer and which ones. You know, the courts offer significantly more, or not significantly, I'd say a couple days more than we do. We have 12 holidays. If we want to extend that to the DEI question, 3 of those 12 holidays are Judeo-Christian holidays, and there are none, even though they're probably a much smaller percent of our workforce, we have no holidays for any other faiths. So if I were Jewish instead of Catholic, I would actually have to take a vacation day to observe Yom Kippur. And is that right or wrong? Is there a better way we should be looking at those holidays? Maybe making some of them floating, depending on, you know, department head approval or supervisor approval, those types of things. Those are some of the critical path decisions we need to have good data and good recommendations on that we can bring to you so that you can make informed decisions. And this project is critical in getting us into that position.
Okay, one more comment, and we need to kind of move forward. So, Ms. Williams?
Steve, I'd like to see maybe you talk with fellow committee members to kind of get fine-tune that scope
Yep.
of work. Like I said, I'm not in support of it as is,
Mhm.
but if there were some changes made, possibly I could support this. I see why it could have value, but at the way it is now, I'm not going to support it.
Okay. I guess a technical question, if we change the scope, does that open up to rebid? And
But it potentially does, but it also depends on what that change in scope would be. So, if it's within the broad context of what was in the original RFP, we can go back to Ernst & Young and negotiate. Because this is an RFP, this is not a hard bid. So we can identify, since they're the only respondent, we can identify Ernst & Young as the most qualified respondent, and then we can go back and negotiate the scope within a reason. If we want to make massive changes, like, for example, adding health insurance, then we're probably looking at reissuing the RFP. So it just depends on what the direction from the committee is going to be.
I'll take Mr. Phelan, one more.
Yeah, one final comment. The last thing I would like to say is the discussion to me sounds to be like this could actually turn into a reoccurring cost. And what I mean by that is the workforce is constantly changing. So how long will the data from this study be accurate to what we're trying to do in the county? I know bandwidth was mentioned, but does Peoria County, or maybe we need to have the discussion to grow the department to be able to do it internally?
Great question, Mr. Phelan, and I don't have a good answer to that question.
Okay. I just throw out, I had a concern about the timing. Kind of ties to Mr. Phelan's question of, this is a snapshot in time. We will ask a vendor to go do a study based on current 2023 marketplace. My impression is that the marketplace is still more of a employee dominant, meaning the employee has more say on where they work, what they do with their compensation. If the economy changes and shifts, it could shift back more neutral or to an employer. How does that impact the outcome of the study? I don't know. But there is a risk that we could do a study in 18 months from now, kind of tying on to Mr. Phelan's comment of the data may not be as relevant. I won't say it isn't relevant, but it won't be as relevant to make decisions. That's just a reality, I guess, in my mind. It's not to say we shouldn't do or should do the study. It's just keep that in mind that things change, data points change, and the economy changes. With that, I will take Ms. Williams' advice. I will reach out to each of the committee members, let you think about it. I'll have some one-on-one. You're always free to talk to Mr. Sorrell or Shauna on getting some of your technical questions answered. I think what I'm hearing is we have a few options. How long is this bid effective for? Is it probably a 60-day?
I don't have the actual response from Ernst & Young in front of me, but obviously after today's discussion, we'll have a conversation with them to inform them of what the committee did today, and I'm not worried about there being an expiration.
Okay. So there's a couple actions we could take. We can discuss it, come to a consensus with a minor rescope that could be negotiated with the one vendor and approve that. We could come back and vote this down because it does take a budget amendment, so that's 2/3 of the full board has to agree to this for a budget amendment. So we could do that, vote it down, and then come back with a plan to rescope substantially and put it back out for rebid, or take a whole different direction, add staff to do it internally. So I think there's a few options, and I don't want to belabor it anymore right now, but I'd ask each of you to think about this. I will reach out to each, kind of try to summarize what I hear from your inputs and what we gained today. Is that a fair move? Okay. In essence of time, there's a couple more items, and I do want, and I apologize, Rob, I'm taking up your meeting. I should have made this an hour. I didn't see it when we put it as a half hour, but we do have one executive topic to talk, so we'll have a closed session executive at the very end. We'll have Shauna give us an update, but before that, I'd like to open it for public comment. We'll get that done. Anybody have public comments? Going once, going twice, no public comment. Miscellaneous. Anybody have miscellaneous topics around the horseshoe? Okay, I do have one miscellaneous that Mr. Sorrell and I did talk about, and I am bringing this up as the committee chair. It's come to my attention that some of our hiring practices within the county, some legal process practice, posting jobs, filling jobs, going through HR, may not be in compliance with certain departments, certain elected, certain areas. And that's sort of disturbing to me because we have processes that protect the county from legal action, make sure we're compliant, especially as we start looking more at DEI. So I am going to put this out for, I guess, a real quick input to the committee, but I'd like to ask that we take some action and ask Mr. Sorrell to work with HR, maybe give us a little more substance around our compliance to the HR hiring process, from job descriptions, job postings, following the process through HR, from interviews, and that whole process to make sure we're in compliance. Anybody have any concerns if we ask to have a report given to us on our current compliance, and then maybe some recommendations of what should be done to make sure all county-wide hiring managers are following the process? Mr. Renault?
Do we have any authority at all? Or what can we do, I guess, to make sure that elected officials are following that? I don't know if we have any authority on that, do we?
I don't know if we have any direct authority. I guess we can use the authority of shame by publishing who's in compliance and who's not. I mean, it'd be a fair, I think, data points to publish. I'm not asking to publish it today. I'd like to give the people who may be not in full compliance an opportunity to address, and maybe there's a reason they're not in compliance that we need to review from an HR standpoint. So I'm not trying to say that the HR policies, guidelines are locked and we can't move. I'd like to get some input from hiring managers as to, okay, you're not in compliance, why not? Is the HR process not meeting your needs to effectively hire people? So I think it's more of a working, hopefully to engage all hiring managers into it with HR, so we get back in, we make sure our policies and our guidelines are effective, efficient, and then we're in compliance. It's a good question. I'll ask Mr. Elsesser, you had a...
I support just bringing the information to us as needed, and maybe even at the next meeting.
Okay. Dr. Blair?
A lack of compliance is risk, and then that cost us money. So yeah, we need to stay in compliance, and anything we can do to help that would be great.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. No?
I know Member Daly had been working on maybe some ethics rules for our organization, and I feel this would be a good spot for that. I know in the state, hiring is included in our code of ethics, so if that's something we could pick that ball back up and include that in there, that would be a good place for it.
Yeah, Ms. Daly is working the ethics topic. I have briefly discussed this with her to kind of tie that connection. So, and I know Administrator Sorrell's worked with her on it, so we can tie that together to make sure that it makes sense. With that, I do have the one executive closed session, so, so I want to propose we move to executive session for... Let me state the reason, sir. I know you're eager, I apologize. For going to executive session for legal purposes. I need a first, Mr. Elsesser, and a second, Mr. Hare. Okay, so we'll give time here to have Gretchen shut down the camera and... Well, we need a...